My name is Luca, and I was born in Ohio, United States. From a very early age, I felt that I didn't fit into the traditional gender categories that my family tried to impose on me. I vividly remember when I was 5, I had a Spider-Man-themed party. The people running the party suggested that we play as princesses or superheroes, but I felt uncomfortable having to choose between being one or the other. The gender rules that everyone seemed to naturally accept made me feel trapped and unsure of how to behave. My family, especially my mother, was strict, traditional, and very religious. She imposed masculine behavior on me: sports, dark clothing, and gentlemanly social manners. These impositions only raised more questions in my adolescent mind, and at one point I thought I might go mad. Every time I tried to talk about something outside the box, I was told, "It's just a phase," or "You don't know what you're saying." My only refuge was my maternal grandfather, Charles. He was a strange person with a free spirit who had lived a life full of unusual experiences. He had an aura of wisdom that didn't come from rigidity, but from a deep acceptance of life in all its diversity. Every time I visited him, I felt as if I could finally breathe freely. The hardest part was that my grandfather lived in New Orleans, and I needed money to visit him. My grandfather never corrected me, and when I tried to tell him that I didn't feel very masculine, he always reacted with remarkable calmness. One day, when I was 12, I told my parents that I wanted to spend Christmas with my grandfather. My plan was to finally work up the courage to tell him the truth about how I felt. My parents did not approve of me being away for so long, but 3 days before Christmas they gave me the plane tickets to visit him. That night, with my heart pounding and tears streaming down my face, I told my grandfather that I didn't feel like a boy or a girl, and that I didn't know what to do with this confusion. Charles, instead of being surprised, just smiled and said, "I don't feel like a man or a woman either, Alex," my grandfather said. I was so shocked I couldn't stop crying. My heart was beating 1,000 times faster in my chest. I hugged him and went home, unable to understand why this reaction had frightened me so much. My parents were surprised to see me back, but I couldn't explain. I just said I'd changed my mind and didn't want to leave them alone for Christmas. 2 years passed before I dared to see my grandfather again. He called me regularly, but I couldn't look him in the eye. I was scared and felt even more confused than before. It wasn't until I was 15 that I decided to see him again. I went back to his new home, which was in New York. I apologized for my absence and told him that I was afraid of the freedom he had given me. He smiled again and just hugged me. From that moment on, my visits to my grandfather's house became a place of freedom, where I could experiment with my identity and speak without fear. Charles told me stories about how he, too, had faced difficult questions and ridicule in his youth. He confessed that although he had never been able to fully live his identity because of the limitations of his time, he saw in me an opportunity for redemption. The tension at home continued to grow. My father was now more authoritarian than my mother, and the arguments about my clothes and behavior didn't stop, but nothing worked. I began to feel more and more suffocated and longed to escape from a home that didn't accept me. One day, before my 16th birthday on the 12th of July, I made a suggestion to my grandfather. "How about starting over somewhere else, where we can be who we really are? No one will tell us how to dress or act. We could go far away, just you and me." My grandfather burst out laughing and hung up the phone. I thought my hope was gone and planned to return to my binary life as a man. 3 months passed before I found an email in my inbox with a plan. The destination was New Orleans, and I knew immediately that my grandfather had everything to do with it. He picked me up that very night in a cheap rental car. I didn't have any suitcases because I didn't want to take my old life with me. During the car ride, I cried like I had never cried before. I thought everything was a lie, that my parents were after me, that my grandfather was playing a trick on me. We arrived at a building that looked like a hotel. From the moment we entered, I knew that everything was different. We were greeted by wonderful, diverse people with colorful hair and distinctive clothes. To my surprise, it was an LGBTQ+ community living together in a co-living arrangement. I was amazed, scared, and couldn't believe that my own grandfather had taken me there. The first few days I was scared and nervous. I didn't know how to behave. I had domestic responsibilities at the residence, as did my grandfather. I was able to finish my studies and become a designer. I have no words to thank my grandfather for being everything to me and for saving me from the hell I was living in. We created a world just for the two of us. Welcome to Real Stories. Welcome to the nation we want. Be queer.